Welcome to the first ever Crime and Music with Michelle L. So today I'm going to talk about Charles Manson. I'm actually not going to talk about the murders though. I'm going to talk about his connections to the music industry, which are quite vast. So in 1962, Charles Manson was incarcerated at McNeil Island Penitentiary, where he learned to play guitar by Alvin Creepy Karpis, who was one of the gang leaders for the Barker Karpis gang. In 1966, he was transferred to Terminal Island Penitentiary. At this time, it was rumored that he had actually auditioned to be part of the Monkees TV show. However, obviously, he was incarcerated. Not true. During this time at Terminal Island, he met Phil Kaufman, who took an interest in Manson's music. They had very similar tastes in music, grew up listening to the same music, and became fast friends. At the time of Manson's release in '67, Phil Kaufman gave him a name to Universal Music contact, Gary Stromberg. In 1968, Manson met the drummer of the Beach Boys, Dennis Wilson. Dennis introduced Manson to some of his music industry friends, such as his fellow bandmates from the Beach Boys, music producer Terry Melcher, who produced the likes of the Byrds, Paul Revere and the Raiders, and who was the only child of Hollywood sweetheart Doris Day. He also met music producer Greg Jacobson, Stephen Stills of Buffalo Springfield, Glenn Campbell, Neil Diamond, and Neil Young. Neil Young was reportedly bought Manson a motorcycle. Neil Young is quoted as saying that Manson wasn't a songwriter, but a song spewer. Young thought Manson was good. Dennis Wilson lived in the Pacific Palisades at this time, and Terry Melcher lived in Benedict Canyon at 10,050 Cielo Drive. At this time, Manson reportedly recorded a record with approximately 20 songs at Universal Records, which to this date has never been released. Manson recorded songs as well at Dennis Wilson's brother's house, Brian Wilson's private recording studio, which was in his home. Manson was introduced to other famous musicians such as John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas and Buffy St. Marie. When Phil Kaufman was finally released from prison in 1968, Gary Stromberg gave him a name of a fellow friend for a place to crash and party. His name was Harold True. Harold True lived at 3267 Waverly Drive in Los Feliz. Dennis Wilson eventually started to distance himself from Charles Manson. When on tour, closer to the end of the year, Wilson had arranged for Greg Jacobson to have Dennis Wilson's possessions moved from his house in the Palisades to an unknown address. Manson went looking for Dennis and left a message with one of his associates, a bullet, with a message that said, "There's more where this comes from." In 1969, Manson continued to try to connect with Terry Melcher for a record deal. During this time, Greg Jacobson came up with likely one of the first reality television show ideas ever. He thought it would be a great idea to video Manson and his girls at their ranch. However, this idea never came to fruition. On August 8th, 1969, family members of Manson's went to Terry Melcher's old address and killed all the people there that night. 5 people were killed. Sharon Tate, who was the actress and wife of Roman Polanski, Jay Sebring, who was an international men's hairstylist, Wojtek Frykowski, who was a childhood friend of Roman Polanski and a writer, Abigail Folger, who was the heiress to the Folger coffee fortune, and Stephen Parent, a friend of William Garretson, the caretaker of the property. William Garretson was the only person to survive that night. He had been in the guest house while the murders had taken place in and around the main house. On August 9th, 1969, Manson family members park in front of 3267 Waverly Drive and walk over to 3301 Waverly Drive, right next door. There, the family members again killed 2 more people, Lino LaBianca, a grocery store owner, and his wife Rosemary, a boutique owner. In 1970, the family members were able to convince Greg Jacobson to relieve some of the tapes that Manson had recorded at Brian Wilson's studio. The record was released with the famous Life magazine photo of Manson as the cover. However, the word life had been changed to lie, as everything that Manson was being accused of was a lie. The record was released to raise money for Manson's defense, as well to get his truth out there. In 1994, prior to the Cielo Drive house being torn down, the last renter of the property was Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails. 10,050 Cielo Drive is where the album Downward Spiral was recorded. When he left, he also took with him the front door of the house, which is now installed at his recording studio in New Orleans. In 1993, Guns N' Roses released the album The Spaghetti Incident with a hidden track to cover Manson's song, Look at Your Game Girl. In 1997, the band Kasabian came out. They are named after a Manson family member, Linda Kasabian. And one last thing, Manson's music, 2 thumbs down. Thanks for joining me.